Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Zain Bando. That's Anthony Balester. This is another episode of wrong show, Forever Power 5. You can follow this show on Twitter and Instagram at FP5ETB and at Forever Power 5. No caps, all lowercase, no spaces. All no caps, no spaces at Forever Power 5 on TikTok. And you can search Forever Power 5 on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DMart, Anthony at Balester555, and Zan at ZanBando99 on Twitter. You can watch this show and all Empty to Bed shows on youtube.com/ETB Network. You can listen to this show on etbpodcast.com, and you can listen to Forever Power 5 wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, this show, Forever Power 5 on the Empty to Bench Network, is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. All right, so it is week 13. The week 13 rankings were just released, and I guess this is just more chaos to throw into the whole thing. I don't know. I do have a lot of thoughts on this, but I do want to get to you guys first. So, Zam, what was your reaction to this?
Sure. So obviously, I mean, the college football playoff rankings are what they are going into this week. I think it's very interesting that you have so much Big Ten representation, and I think that particularly what jumped out to me from that perspective is, I think the rankings committee is really telling Indiana, like, hey, if you go into Columbus and you beat Ohio State, that means that we did our jobs to rank you as high as we did. If you go in and lose a close game, then we may have to reevaluate. If you go in and get blown out, there's a chance that we might leave you out of the entire picture, considering that Indiana's yet to play a single AP top 25 team to this point. I think it's also very interesting, too. I think that bottom half of the top 10 is very interesting. That whole mess that is Georgia, SMU, Miami, and a couple other teams in it, as well as Alabama. I think that entire kind of bottom half of the top 10, if you will, is a little bit messed up. And I just want to say, and this is as unbiased as I could possibly be about this, I don't understand at this point in the season how you have Missouri, who was shut out 34-0 against Alabama a couple weeks ago, ranked ahead of Illinois, who's only lost to, the number one was and number 4 and number 5 team in the country, and a Minnesota team that's pretty good. So that's something that blew me away as well. And I just want to say too, as a Miami fan, I think given the body of work that it's had this entire year minus its one loss, I think they're being a little bit disrespected. I think there are a lot of different ways you could slice and dice these rankings, but I do think, at least for me, the top 4 at the current moment is the correct top 4. The rest, I think, is entirely up for debate, and I really do think the most intriguing race till the end of the year is going to be what the heck happens in the SEC, as well as what the heck is going on in the Big 12, because at the very moment, at the time that we're recording this, I think it's 9 teams still have a chance to make the championship, although there are like numerous tiebreakers at play and other things like that. And also, the news was revealed a couple hours before the rankings. Oregon will represent one half of the Big Ten in the Big Ten championship, so that'll be very interesting as well. The question is going to be, who are they going to play on the other side of it? So those were my overall takings about the rankings going into the next edition of them, and I think that the final few weeks of the regular season are going to be very interesting.
Well, I will say I was wondering what the over-under was for how long it will take for one of us to bring up Missouri being ranked. You beat me to it. You beat me to it. It was like maybe 3 or 4 minutes in that somebody brought up that you brought up Missouri being ranked, and of course you had to make it about Illinois.
Of course, of course.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Like, is Eli Drinkwitz like blackmailing the committee? I don't know what it is that is making the committee put Missouri at 23.
I don't know. I don't get it. I don't
mean,
know
when
if
you
it's I don't know if it's brand bias. I don't know what
is
it is.
Missouri really a big brand though?
No, I don't think so.
They're not. They're no Alabama, Miami, or Georgia. They're nothing like that. They're Missouri. They're not even supposed to be that good ever. Like it's just so odd to me that they're ranked so high. I don't.
Right.
It's hard to justify some of these rankings. I mean, LSU is now not an unranked team, and I get it. However, there are some teams in here that are just like, all right. You have UNLV ranked at 24. You have
UNLV being ranked ahead of Illinois is absolutely hilarious in my opinion.
Well, yeah, who has UNLV even played?
That's what I'm saying.
like you have UNLV ranked at like 24, but LSU gets dropped down. I mean, realistically, LSU is a top 25 team probably. I mean, there's just a few rankings here that don't make a ton of sense. I mean, don't get me wrong. This is the toughest time for the committee as opposed to the past because you're ranking the rankings that matter are top 12. And the truth is, it is harder to rank 12 teams than it is to rank 4 teams. Like it is a lot. Like for the most part, when we had a 4-team playoff, it was fairly easy to rank the top 4 teams. For the most part, people often argued with it and disagreed with it, but I thought I thought it was fairly easy to rank top 4 teams. Top 12 teams is completely different, and right now it's just, especially with the SEC and everything, especially with the SEC and a whole bunch of 2-loss teams and teams beating each other. I mean, I am fine with the way the rankings are now, and the reason is because there's no good answers. Even though realistically, I don't think that this is exactly in the order of who the best teams are. It's hard to say because they all play very, very different strength of schedules, even within conferences. I mean, sure, Texas is 9-1, but I don't think that Texas is the best team in the SEC. I'm not saying I know who the best team in the SEC is, and I usually have a strong opinion about it. This year I don't, but I'm not in any way convinced that Texas is number 3 in the country. I am hopping on Anthony's bandwagon here. I think Texas is a little bit overrated. I don't know.
So then I guess to follow up on that point, if you think that Texas is a little overrated, and you were the one doing the rankings, number 1, where do you think Texas should be? And number 2, which team would you replace Texas with more specifically?
Well, that's the question. I mean, I don't know exactly what I would do because there's no good answers, really. I mean, I would say maybe I would put Penn State ahead of Texas. Maybe I would do that. But
I would counter you and say, Nick D, in realistic terms, who is Penn State's realistic best win? It's hard to say.
Illinois, right?
I would say it's either Illinois. I would say it's either Illinois or Wisconsin. The thing that you have to remember,
even USC is not USC. You could argue is one of their best wins.
It's true because USC was still decent at the time.
They went on the road, and USC was actually a fairly good road team, and it was earlier in the season. It wasn't a terrible win, but Penn State's resume isn't great. Which, by the way, if you look at all of these teams, none of their resumes really are that great outside of Oregon and Ohio State. And even Ohio State's resume is still a little bit shaky. But if you look at all these teams, they either have 2 losses or they have 1 loss or 0 losses, but they haven't beaten anybody that good, which is why I don't think it's fair to Indiana how much people are ragging on Indiana for not having a good resume, whereas the same thing could be said about Miami. Miami's resume isn't good either. All right, Anthony, let's go to you. We haven't heard from you.
Yeah, I've been saying for weeks that I think Penn State should be ahead of Texas. I mean, it's as simple as this. I mean, look at their best wins. Penn State's best win is against Illinois. Texas's best win against Vanderbilt. I'm not sure if you could clearly say one's better than the other, but one team in Illinois is ranked right now. Vanderbilt's not ranked right now. And then when you look at losses, one team got blown out by Georgia. The other team lost a very close game to Ohio State. So I think even if you look at their best wins and best losses, you can make the argument that Penn State should be ahead of Texas. Now, if you want to go by eye test and, what team probably has the highest ceiling, what team you probably have the most faith in delivering in the playoffs, then you could go with Texas. But if you're just going based on resume and what they've done on the field, you got to side with Penn State. But in terms of just the overall rankings, me and, Nick, we were talking about this last week on this mess with the SEC. And we said that if Georgia goes out there and wins, what team is going to be left out? And me and you both were on a consensus that we thought it'd be Tennessee would be the team that would be left out of the playoffs. And I think we were right. Right now, they're one of the first teams that are out. And I think that's rightfully so. They look very bad in a lot of games and inconsistent. And even though they did beat Alabama, I just feel like overall Alabama has been a better team. I mean, that was a close road loss game for Alabama, and that game could have gone either way. And I think if they were to play again, Alabama probably wins. So I think they got that right. And look at BYU. Now that BYU lost, Boise State's looking at a good opportunity to get that first round bye as a group of 5 team. Because right now it looks like they're probably going to be ranked ahead of whoever the Big 12 champion is going to be. So that's great for Boise State for a G5 group of 5 team to get a bye over one of these power conference teams.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. Yeah, because it took me a while to really think it through and think of what my position is between the 3 of them, because Alabama beat Tennessee. Tennessee beat Alabama. Alabama beat Georgia, and Georgia beat Tennessee. So between those three teams, you can't really use head to head because they all beat each other. But it is worth noting that you have to look at the resume as a whole. Even though Alabama beat Georgia, I think Georgia is a better team than Alabama. Even though Tennessee beat Alabama, I still think Alabama's a better team than Tennessee. And a lot of those are just products of being the home team versus the road team. I mean, look, Ole Miss lost to LSU. Is anybody going to argue now that LSU is a better team than Ole Miss? The better team doesn't always win. So I don't think it's that big of a deal necessarily, the head-to-head, especially when teams all beat each other. And also it's worth noting that, look, when Alabama lost to Tennessee had to come back late in the game. Tennessee, they won by a score at home. And we're not a convincingly better team. Alabama kind of just blew that game. And it's the same thing with Georgia and Alabama. Georgia laid an egg in the first half in that game. I think that game also was largely a product of Alabama being the home team. And Alabama was not a convincingly better team than Georgia. However, Georgia was a convincingly better team than Tennessee. That is just a fact. They were they physically dominated that game. They won on a 31-7 run. So that's the difference. And also Tennessee's resume is not as good. Tennessee has struggled against much weaker opponents, as opposed to a team like Alabama, who also blew out LSU. Now, I get LSU isn't great, but Tennessee's wins, most of their wins outside of Alabama, haven't been great. So just when you look at everything as a whole and you look at the ceilings and the floors of the team, I don't think Tennessee has a high ceiling. I don't think they have a high ceiling. Georgia, they have a high ceiling and a low floor, is how I would put it. They can absolutely lay an egg like they've done a lot, but they can also look amazing, like they did against Tennessee or in the second half against Alabama. Whereas I don't think Tennessee has a ceiling anything close to that.
So, with that being said, as we're sitting here recording this, there's 6 teams that are still mathematically alive for the SEC championship. Based on what we know about tiebreakers, et cetera, and all that other stuff, if you were to predict, right now, the week of November 23rd, going into week 13, who do you think is going to wind up in Atlanta playing at the beginning of December?
Well, from what I understand, I think, because I was listening to a podcast on this, I was listening to Joel Klatt, and he was saying that the way the tiebreaker is working now in the SEC is that Texas would play Alabama, and I suppose the tiebreaker is common opponents. So so I'm pretty sure Texas would end up playing Alabama in the SEC championship game. That's how I'm pretty sure it would work.
So just to clarify that, I mean, all we would really need for an Alabama, well, potentially an Alabama Georgia SEC championship. This is according to the Action Network. It's in the simplest terms, Alabama just needs to win out and get one more Missouri win, no matter who Missouri beats. Doesn't matter over the course of its final 2 games. And the 2 teams that have the least likely of a path to get in because they beat themselves are Ole Miss and Tennessee. So it's really going to come down to if Texas is still there at the end, if Alabama is still there at the end, and if Georgia's still there at the end. If one of those 3 teams slips up, there's a chance that the other team who didn't slip up will more than likely face Alabama, assuming Alabama wins out.
So so you're saying if Alabama wins out, they're definitely in.
Yes, they would be in. They would be in with 2 wins plus 1 Missouri loss down the stretch.
My question is, what if Texas loses to A&M?
Okay, so that's a good question because according to the same article, Texas and Texas A&M control their own destiny. So if one of those 2 teams lose, it needs outside help.
So they'll need outside. So if Texas loses, they're not definitely in, is what you're saying.
Correct. Their probability would go way down into like the 60% range. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I be honest with you guys? If Texas goes out there and lays an egg against Texas A&M, out of all these SEC teams we talked about is how much we want to bash Tennessee. I mean, we can make an argument that out of all these SEC teams, Texas should be last. I mean, if you want to go based on resume and they go out there and lay an egg against Texas A&M, how good is their resume really when you stack them up against all these other SEC teams who had to play each other and basically went back and forth with each other, and Texas had kind of an easy schedule compared to the rest of these SEC teams?
Well, the reason Texas is ranked so, and you do have a point in what you're saying. Like, you're not wrong. I'll tell you, the reason is fairly obvious, and it's record. That's the reason why. I mean, like, I thought for years that the committee was far too record obsessed. Not as much anymore, but for many years, I kind of thought they were just really obsessed with record. When you look at the rankings, it's just like, all right, you got all the 1-loss teams here, and then right below that are the 2-loss teams and all that. So record is the obvious reason. But in fairness, on the other side of that argument is that, well, Tennessee also, they have 2 losses. They also lost to Georgia in a similar fashion to how Texas lost to Georgia, but also they also do have a loss, and it was against Arkansas. So you can kind of say the same thing about Tennessee in a sense.
So this is where it gets insane. This is what would need to happen in order for potentially Ole Miss to get in. So it says Ole Miss needs to win out, plus Alabama lose 1 more game, plus if Vanderbilt beat Tennessee and Texas A&M lose out. In this scenario, that would give Texas the number 1 seed and create only a 2-way tie for second place between Georgia and Ole Miss, in which Ole Miss would get that because Ole Miss won the head-to-head tiebreaker. So
that's the only way Ole Miss gets in.
That's correct. Yep.
So that is a wild scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if one of those scenarios doesn't go exactly according to plan, they're out. So
yeah. Right. Which, by the way, will be fine for Ole Miss. They're a playoff team anyway. All they have to do is win out. They don't have to make the SEC championship game.
Right.
And by the way, I think
pretty much based on the scenario breakdown I did for you guys, there's a relatively good chance. I would say, if I were to do my own probability here, I would say there's about a 75% chance that we're going to get a rematch between Georgia and Alabama in the SEC championship game. Assuming Alabama doesn't slip up, and assuming that Texas A&M wreaks havoc and potentially beats Texas the last game of the year.
Well, that's a pretty big assumption, though. Texas are the favorites.
It's true.
Texas is favored. So
well,
Texas
that's why I brought that point up. I said if Texas A&M wins, they all got 2 losses.
Wait, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Texas A&M would then be in.
Oh, yeah, that's a good. Yeah, see, this is where it gets very, very confusing.
I mean, look, I don't think Texas A&M is going to beat Texas, but I'll tell you, I think that if Texas loses to Texas A&M, and I know we went through all the scenarios. If like people are bringing up, well, what if a team goes to the conference championship and loses and they end up with 3 losses? Is that going to hurt? Is that going to hurt them? Are they gonna be
Actually,
left out?
to correct myself, if A&M wins out, A&M is in. So
Right. But does Texas have any chance of being in the conference championship if they lose to A&M?
According to what I'm seeing, no, but I'm sure that somehow in some other tiebreaker that I'm not aware of, I'm sure that there's some other scenario out there.
Okay, that makes sense. So in all likelihood, if Texas loses to Texas A&M, they're not in. And I'll tell you, I think that if Texas A&M beats Texas, which would be pretty huge, they get in. And it's pretty safe to assume Texas probably will not be in the conference championship. In that scenario, we're still in the same situation. You just swap out Texas for Texas A&M. That's really all it is. You just switch Texas and Texas A&M, and you're still in the same scenario. And people are bringing up, well, if a team goes to the conference championship and loses, are they going to be left out of the playoffs because they have 3 losses? And the answer is fairly obviously no. That losing in the conference championship will not hurt them.
Would you say it depends on how you lose, though?
A little bit.
Blown out, that could definitely affect you.
Yes, but it would have to be really bad.
Right, because could you imagine if A&M versus UT goes to overtime or something, and of course the committee would have to determine, okay, did Texas play well enough to still deserve to be where they are, and that's only a question that they can answer. So.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing is, though, the only scenario in which I can see a team being left out if they lose the conference championship game would be if the only way they can get in would be to win the whole thing. Like let's take a team like Texas. Let's say they have, now this is almost certainly not going to happen, but if you take a team like, say, Texas, and they lose to Texas A&M, and all the tiebreakers work out to the point where they get to the conference championship game, in that scenario, they would have to win in order to actually get in because the rest of their schedule has not been strong enough.
No, I agree with that. I agree, yeah.
And also, that's not penalizing them for making it and losing. That's just saying you have to win it all in order to make it. And you wouldn't have made it had you not made the conference championship game. So that is way different from, say, penalizing a team that hasn't that went to the conference championship game and lost. And a lot of people don't like the committee, and the committee is often unpopular, as committees always are. But that doesn't, to be quite honest, that doesn't sound like something they would do. That doesn't sound like something they would ever do.
I don't think so either. What I just think makes this whole thing so confusing is because you're not basing it off of who beat who and stuff of like that. You are, but at the same time you aren't, and that's what makes it head scratching. Like, in my opinion,
because you can't.
Well, right. I'm just saying, in my opinion, if it was up to me, 6 teams would still not be in contention going into the final 2 weeks. It would be like 2. So I don't know.
Wait. What do you mean if it were up to you? Like,
I just think I don't know. I don't know. Well, I just think they make the tiebreaker system so confusing that it's almost like everybody. I've always been of the belief that everybody should just play each other, and non-conference games against FCS schools should be eliminated completely to avoid issues like this.
Yeah, but even if you played 12 in-conference games, there's in the super conference era, there's too many teams. Not every team would play each other. One thing, true. I mean, I'm fine with non-conference games, actually, because you see some great non-conference games. And the thing is, 3 out of the 4 of them in the SEC and ACC are against like culinary schools and trucking schools, and 2 out of 3 of them in the Big 10 and the Big 12 are against against very soft competition also. So right. the most teams ever do is schedule 1 tough non-conference game.
Right. Exactly.
That's the most. I mean, one thing you could do is do it like the way the NFL does with scheduling, and so that, like, based on how you finish, where you finished last year, you're going to, that determines your schedule the year after. Therefore, the better teams all play each other. That's the only thing I could think of.
Right, exactly.
I mean, like, scheduling is out of control, even in within conferences. Like in the SEC, I mean, like the disparity of schedules is just crazy. I mean, you look at a team like Missouri, who is only ranked as high as they are because their schedule is just so weak. That's the only reason why. And you look at a team like Oklahoma who plays in Georgia, and Georgia's only ranked as low as they are because, frankly, because they play such a tough schedule. So I think scheduling is something that has to be taken into account. That is really the problem with super conferences, though, is that teams don't all play each other. And by the way, even before super conferences, it was like this. I mean, the only conference where teams all played each other was the Big 12 when they still had 10 teams. That was the only time.
Right,
that was the only time.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's really just, I think, sort of a problem with super conferences. And the truth is, I also think that I can't stand automatic bids.
Mm-hmm.
I can't stand automatic bids. I don't think if BYU, I don't think BYU, even if they win the Big 12, I don't think they should get in necessarily. I think that the conferences are too uneven.
Wait, even if BYU finishes with one loss?
I don't think their schedule has been good enough necessarily.
Okay, Anthony, what do you think?
I agree. I hate automatic bids because I think we know right now if Vegas had a neutral field site game with BYU against any of these SEC teams, it's probably going to be double-digit favorites for that SEC team.
Yeah, and also it's worth noting BYU, they just lost to Kansas. They were only BYU at home were 2.5-point favorites at home. So which goes to show which is Vegas telling you that those teams are even.
Right.
That's what it is.
And Kansas has been playing better football the last month.
Yeah. I mean,
Kansas nearly beat Kansas State.
Yeah. So, well, that's not saying much. I think Kansas State is very. I mean, their quarterback is a former NBA head coach.
Right.
Avery Johnson. So I do want to move on, talk a little bit about these Deion Sanders, the Dallas Cowboys rumors. So I don't know if any of this is true or not. However, the more I hear about this, the more sense it starts to make. You know what I mean? This is one of those things where 2 months ago, if I had heard this, I would say this is just bananas. Like, this is not going to happen. But the more, as time progresses, I think this makes more and more sense, especially given how bad the Cowboys are now and how bad of a job Mike McCarthy has done. And on top of that, how good of a job Deion Sanders has done at Colorado and how much better they've gotten. So I don't know if this is accurate or not. I mean, we hear rumors like this all the time. Of course, Deion Sanders denied it. And look, we've for many years have heard rumors about head coaches going, college coaches going, or even coaches that are currently inactive, like John Gruden and guys like that. Like how many times we've heard their names floated around for every sort of coaching vacancy, and Deion Sanders might end up like that too. And the thing is that it is worth noting that Colorado is probably just a stepping stone for Deion Sanders. He has no real connection to Colorado. His son plays there right now. His sons play there right now, and but they're not going to play there forever. And it's not that good of a job in college football. Like, it's an average sort of job. It's not great.
Yeah, I mean, it's only relevant right now because he's the coach. I mean, if he wasn't the coach, would we really be talking about Colorado? Probably not. So,
well, it's crazy. Like, look, Deion Sanders deserves all the credit in the world as a coach. And I think a lot of the reason he did such a great job is just his brand. Like, he's Deion Sanders. He is a cultural phenomenon. And that alone attracts a lot of recruits to Colorado. But you can't say he's not a good coach also, because he clearly is a good coach. I mean, what he's done at Colorado has been absolutely remarkable. And NFL coaches are really seeing that. I mean, look, I don't know what he wants to do. It is worth noting that on the Herd the other day, Michael Irvin was asked about it. And he said, I have really good sources that say that he would take it. Now, I don't know what he means by really good sources, but there's a good chance when he says really good sources, Deion himself told him that. There's a really good chance that that's the case. And it is worth noting, college football coaches are the least loyal people on earth. They are They are not.
We'll get Nick. We'll get Nick Saban. He promised the whole world that that he wasn't going to Alabama. 2 days later, he goes to Alabama.
Right. I mean, you have to remember, college football coaches, if they're good enough to do it, they treat these jobs like Tinder matches. Like they're just swiping and swiping. Just they hit it and quit it with these teams. That's what they do a lot of the time, unless they give them a really good deal, like Nick Saban had at Alabama. So it is worth noting all of that. And this is a guy like Deion Sanders, who, frankly, if you would have told me 5 years ago Deion Sanders was going to be the head coach at Colorado, I would say that sounds a little nuts.
Yeah,
it seems like a job that's beneath him. Like to me, and I'm not saying it is, but like when you look at a guy like Deion Sanders, it's like, to me, becoming a college football coach, to me, I thought was odd. I don't know if you're laughing.
I'm laughing at the fact that you just said that to some degree that him becoming a college football coach was odd at the time, because I agree with you.
Yeah, no, it was. It seemed a little odd. I mean, like, it does, because it's like most college football coaches start off, maybe they played in college, but most of them are just most of them. Or maybe we're laughing at my Tinder analogy.
No, well, that actually was
like, this is like Colorado is not to sound like Colin Cowherd, but Colorado is a Tinder date for Deion Sanders, is how I would put it.
Fair enough. Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I said it maybe on our first show of the season. I said, in my opinion, I don't really can picture Deion Sanders being at Colorado long after Shedeur Sanders leaves. Now, if that's him going to a bigger school like Florida State or him going to the NFL, it's just hard for me to imagine Deion staying at Colorado long term. I just think that his brand is just too big, and at some point he's just going to be too big and too good for Colorado, and he's going to move on to better things.
Anthony, if Shedeur Sanders transfers to Florida State, that gives Florida State instant credibility right away. That would be unbelievable. You want to talk about them being down in the dumps this year? If he went through, it would be an instant upgrade to where, if you're a Florida State fan, you're thinking, okay, 7-5 or 8-4 might actually be in reach.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, I don't know how Mike Norvell hasn't been fired yet.
I mean,
to me, Mike Norvell has done such a bad job. It will not be enough to just fire him. They have to fire him in a humiliating fashion, like leave him at the airport. He's done such a bad job.
Leave him at the airport.
Yeah,
oh
like,
my
do
God.
a Lane Kiffin thing. Like, that's what he does. Like, just getting fired, I don't think is enough with how bad of a job Mike Norvell has done.
I mean, Nick D, would you argue that he should get fired on the field after the last game of the season?
I would say he should get fired on the field probably before the last game of the season. Go to an
Before the last game of the season.
That's probably like that's how bad of a job he's done. I mean, people are talking about Billy Napier, but I mean, like, I don't even think those two things compare. Mike Norvell has been infinitely worse than Billy Napier, and I mean, like, this is also a program with high expectations. I mean, about 10 years ago, they won a championship.
Right, under Jim.
Which I know sounds like a long time ago, but it's really not in the world of sports and winning championships. Notre Dame hasn't won since, I think, 88. So this is a program with high expectations, and Mike Norvell has just fallen flat on his face.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Anthony, do you somewhat agree, or would you give Mike Norvell any sort of sympathy at all? What do you think?
I mean, it's hard. You know, you would think after having a season like he did last year, how do you fire someone the season rate after having such a successful year? But I mean, this season's been such a disaster, and I feel like he's maybe lost the locker room, and I feel like they just need to change. I think Mike Norvell may be able to get another head coaching job somewhere else, maybe not as a high marketable team like Florida State, but I think he's definitely a decent head coach. I just think right now it's best for both parties to probably part way. But in terms of the Dallas Cowboys, you know, one good thing is obviously they're probably going to have a high draft pick, so they shouldn't really have to trade up much to get Shedeur Sanders if they want him. And if Shedeur Sanders comes out and says, I only play for Dallas, I mean, that just makes it that much easier for them to get him. The only thing is that would make it difficult if they did just give Dak Prescott a $60 million year contract. I know they can't really get out of it until 2027, so they're kind of tied with Dak for the next 2 years. So that kind of gives them two options. You either could have Dak Prescott on the team with Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur's on a rookie deal, so you're not paying him too much money. Or maybe you could have to give Dak Prescott to a really quarterback desperate team that's willing to basically give you pennies on the dollar, like a low draft pick, because that contract is so high they won't get much for him. So either you got to get rid of Dak Prescott for nothing, or you just got to keep him on the salary books for a little while and let it play out. But I think if you could get Deion and you could get Shador with the Dallas brand, I mean, Jerry Jones is going to love that. I mean, they're going to be talking about Dallas more now, and you know Jerry Jones loves that. So
it would be,
I would love it.
It would be the most Dallas Cowboys thing to do.
Of course.
It really would be the most Jerry Jones thing. And it would be like, imagine like the national sports media is already obsessed with the Dallas Cowboys.
Almost too obsessed.
This is no secret.
The same obsession with the Yankees and the Lakers.
No. But it's worse. At least than the Yankees. The Lakers, it's like, it's a lot of that's LeBron. But it's like, ESPN First Take, all about the Cowboys and about LeBron. And, people blame the media for all that stuff. But the real reason is because we like it. And by we, I mean the consumers. There's a whole lot of Dallas Cowboy fans all around the world, all around the country, I should say. It wouldn't be that hard to find a Dallas Cowboy fan in New York City. It wouldn't be that hard to do. Just like kind of like the Yankees, and LeBron is always a big topic in sports media because people care about LeBron.
Right.
But imagine what this would do in terms of the sports media. This would be like what the Dallas Cowboys are now, but on steroids. That's what it would be. I mean, just look at how big of a story Colorado is. Look at our viewership when we talk about Deion Sanders versus when we don't.
Let me ask you guys this real quick before we move on. We know immediately when Deion Sanders went to Colorado, he immediately became the face of college football, and that was all we talked about. Now, if you add in the popularity of the Dallas Cowboys, Shador Sanders, and Deion, combine them all together, I know as great as Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs are, but would next year, would Dallas Cowboys and Deion Sanders be the most talked about and maybe the face of the league for that season? I think they would be the most popular thing going.
Of course. They could start 0-6 and they would still be in the news every single day.
Yeah, well, that's kind of how it is with the Cowboys right now. I mean, he made Colorado culturally relevant. Not just a good team, but culturally relevant. I mean, Lil Wayne is apparently a Colorado fan now. Imagine.
Yeah, he's on the sidelines too.
He's on the sidelines in the game. Imagine if there's all sorts of celebrity fans. Drake is a Raptors fan and apparently a Kentucky fan and things like that.
Right,
which makes sense because he's from Toronto and Kentucky's a big brand. Lil Wayne is from New Orleans and he's a Colorado fan. And that is so odd to me. That would never have happened without Deion Sanders.
Right.
And by the way, Ray Lewis apparently is a candidate to coach at Florida Atlantic.
Wow. That is
not that I care about Florida Atlantic very much, but I do think it's a pretty big deal if Ray Lewis becomes their head coach.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll start. I guess the one thing I'll say is just a small message to ESPN. You might need to clear some airtime because if this happens, you better damn well believe that Florida Atlantic will be on TV a couple of times next year.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Well, it could be similar to the Deion Sanders thing, kind of. I think, except Ray Lewis is not the cultural phenomenon that Deion Sanders is, but it would be sort of similar. I mean, if I was Ray Lewis, I would just stick to broadcasting, being on TV. That seems much easier to me than becoming a college football coach, but. Some people want to challenge themselves. Some people want to do the thing that's difficult. Probably
honestly, so. I think Deion changed it. I think Deion is opening the door, and all these other retired players are thinking, "Damn, I should do what Deion's doing. Go to a smaller college and just be the face of the sport. Make millions of dollars. Coach young kids. You're doing. You have a purpose. You're helping young men, or you're helping young kids become men. You're helping football players become better players. I mean, I did read though that he's emerging as a candidate. He's not the leader in the clubhouse, but I think FAU should just do it because, I mean, that's the reason why we're talking about him right now. I mean, why else would you even want to talk about FAU? So
could you imagine,
for branding reasons they should do this.
Yeah, I was going to say, could you imagine if he was hired, how much enrollment would just skyrocket because he would be the football coach? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what happened when Deion Sanders went to Colorado.
Right.
That's exactly what happened. Yeah, that would be a sort of a sort of interesting thing to see. And then, of course, the case from 20 years ago is going to come. 25 years ago now, almost, is going to come up.
Probably, yeah, probably.
Not unfairly.
Right.
Justified.
So I do want to talk about. I do want to get into some picks. Indiana is at Ohio State. Ohio State is 13.5, 2-touchdown favorites. I'll tell you, I think Ohio State wins this game outright. However, I think the spread is too big. I think Indiana is good enough to compete with Ohio State. And I think that I could see this being sort of similar to the Penn State game. I think that Ohio State is, don't get me wrong, Ohio State's a very good team, though they have shown lots of flaws throughout the season. Indiana is undefeated, and outside of the Michigan game, they won every game by a very big margin, and their offense is one of the best in the country. Ohio State's defense often gives up a lot of explosive plays in big spots, which they did a lot against Oregon and Nebraska. And I don't think Ohio State covers this. I think they win, but they don't cover. And also has had some shaky games throughout the year. They've had some issues with their offensive line and running the ball, and we don't know what Indiana's game plan is exactly. So I just don't trust Ohio State to cover the 2-touchdown spread.
I guess I'll go next. Between these two teams, Ohio State is the longest active winning streak in the Big Ten. I think dating back to 2000 or something, they've won 20 plus games against these guys in a row. I think it's going to continue this Saturday. I think Ohio State is a very good team. I don't think Indiana is overrated by any means, but when this is the only good team on your entire schedule that you play, and pretty much every single game, maybe minus the Michigan game, has almost been target practice, I think you're playing a totally different beast. I think Ryan Day realizes that he's potentially playing for his job, especially if Ohio State somehow misses the college football playoff again. I think this is a blowout waiting to happen, and I actually think Ohio State covers in a big way and actually wins by about 3 touchdowns or so. I think it'll be a good game for like a quarter, and I think you'll get a Curtis Rourke pick 6 that opens the floodgates, in my opinion. So
if Indiana wins, I'm definitely clipping that.
Okay. Well, for parity's sake, I do hope Indiana wins because it would make for an unbelievable story. But there's no way I can pick against the Buckeyes in the horseshoe, especially as a 2-touchdown favorite. It's tough to do, and I'm not going to start this week.
Yeah, well, I still like Ohio State to win, but I just don't think they're going to cover. That's the only thing.
Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Nick D. I'm going to go with Ohio State, no cover. Ohio State, like I said, they had offensive line issues. Now they fixed that by moving their guard to left tackle, but now they have another injury at center. And we know that's a bad recipe against Indiana, who's got a really good pass rush. They got Kumara, who leads all of college in quarterback pressures. He's been unbelievable. But what I think is going to be the deciding factor in this one is I think Ohio State's run game. I think Ohio State's going to get their running backs going with Judkins, Travion, and Henderson. I like Curtis Rourke and Will Howard. I think Curtis Rourke and Will Howard with the receivers that both these teams have. I mean, both these teams have 2 of the best receiving corps in all of college football. So I think that's going to give us some fireworks as well. But I think the difference is going to be Ohio State's running backs. But because of Ohio State's offensive line injuries and just because of how great Indiana has been against, obviously less competition, but they've been blowing them out. I'm going to give the Indiana the respect to, at least be able to keep it close. So give me Ohio State, no cover.
All right. Colorado minus 2.5 at Kansas. This line is very telling. This line is very telling that Colorado is only 2.5-point favorites at Kansas, on the road at Kansas. Every time I bet against Colorado, I'm wrong. Every time I doubt them, they just prove me wrong. And whenever I bet on them, they prove me wrong. So I'm always wrong when it comes to Colorado, is how I would put it. But of all the teams in the Big 12 right now, Colorado's the hottest team in the Big 12. They are the hottest team in the Big 12, and it's not even really close. Like maybe Arizona State might be they're a very hot team too. But Colorado is probably the hottest team in the Big 12 right now. And Kansas is coming off a great win. I could see this being a bit of a letdown game for Kansas, potentially. And just Colorado, like, I don't think they're vastly better than Kansas based on the way Kansas is playing right now. But this is essentially a pick 'em. Who wins outright? And to me, I think Colorado wins outright. I think they win by a touchdown or more.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, I think this is potentially one of those trap games. I think Kansas has been playing a little bit better as of late. I do think Colorado is the better team, but I think playing in a tough environment, knowing that if Colorado slips up here down the stretch, it could be the end of their Big 12 championship hopes, I should say. So I actually want Colorado to win, but I think it's going to be a very close game. I think that Jalen Daniels keeps the Jayhawks in it, and I think that unfortunately, I actually think that Kansas is going to miss a potential game-winning field goal, and Colorado is going to escape Lawrence with a 1-point win.
I could see that. That would be a very Colorado thing to happen
for sure.
I could see it. Well, how long do you think that field goal is going to be? Like, it be like easy field goal, tough field goal?
I'd say like a 41-yard field goal attempt, a fairly long one
for college.
Yeah,
or for Greg Zuerlein.
Right.
All right, go ahead.
I've been saying for weeks that this Kansas team's a lot better than their record shows. I said a couple weeks ago that they were probably the best 3-win team maybe in college football history. I mean, their point differential is like in the plus 40s or 50s. I mean, even their losses have been really close, and they have a lot of big wins. And over the last few weeks,
40s and 50s, and then number 1 and number 2. This was a Kansas team that was 3 minutes away from beating Illinois at Illinois in September. So yeah.
I mean, so Kansas has been playing really, really well over the last few weeks. And, Jalen Daniels has stepped it up. The receiving core has stepped it up. Devin Neal. I love Mateo Dotson, the corner. Kobe Bryant, the other corner. So they got 2 shutdown corners. But I feel like after having that emotional win against BYU, I just feel like, they could only, win so many games in a row, and they're due for a loss. They've been playing so well. This is just the perfect game for them to lose. And, Colorado, man, the offense and pass rush for Colorado has been so much improved. And I think that's going to be the difference in this one. I think their offensive line will actually be able to hold up against Kansas. And usually when Shedeur Sanders is able to get protected, you're not going to be able to beat Colorado. So I'm going to go with Colorado to win.
All right. And cover?
Yeah.
Okay, I figured. Army at Notre Dame. Notre Dame is giving 14.5. I like Notre Dame because they seem to cover these spreads. Like, they seem to be really good against the spread, Notre Dame. And they're playing at home. And every week, that loss against Northern Illinois makes less and less sense. So I really like Notre Dame to cover this.
Actually, just to quickly correct you, this game is not at Notre Dame. This game is actually at Yankee Stadium.
Oh, it's not. Okay, so it's versus Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll fix that.
Even though Notre Dame is technically the home team in the game, it's a neutral site game.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So I see. Okay, so it's a neutral site game at Yankee Stadium. So it's probably they're going to be selling like $10 water bottles there.
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
All right. So either way, that doesn't really change my prediction that much. I still think they'll cover.
I don't think so either. I think Notre Dame has just better talent on both sides of the ball, and I think this will be an easy win. I think they'll probably end up running up the score. And as you just alluded to, Nick D, they seem to cover these spreads pretty comfortably, so I think the same is going to hold true here.
Yeah, I mean, they should easily be able to beat these Service Academy teams. I mean, look, the Service Academy teams are very hard to evaluate because of the competition that they play. And right. I usually don't really have much faith in the service in the military teams. Like most of them don't most of the time they don't pass very. I haven't watched Army much this year, but most of the time they don't like pass the ball. They just run the ball all the time. All right, go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, I made the mistake last time, early in the year when I said that Navy was going to upset Notre Dame, and I'm not going to make the same mistake again. Obviously, Army has been a better team than Navy, so they should give them a much closer game. Bryson Daly, obviously, like Nick said, they don't run the ball, but Bryson Daly, the quarterback, has a lot of rushing touchdowns. He's been very impactful for this team. I'm going to go Notre Dame to win and cover. Like I said, I'm not going to make the same mistake, but I will say this statement before we move on. If Army goes out there and could somehow get the upset over Notre Dame, I mean, how is Army not talked about in being in the playoffs as the group of 5 team? If they continue to win out, they'd be undefeated and they'd have a win over Notre Dame. I think that would be much impressive resume than what Boise State would have. So if Army goes out there and wins this game, you got to look at Army as a team that can make the college football playoffs.
That would be wild if that were to happen.
For sure.
That would be pretty wild. BYU at Arizona State. Arizona State is giving 3.
It's a huge game. It's a Big 12 championship elimination game, essentially.
That's exactly what it is. And by the way, it is worth noting, BYU, even though they're a 1-loss team, they are very fortunate they're not a 3-loss team. they are this close to being a 3-loss team because they needed a miracle to beat Oklahoma State, and they got a very favorable, questionable holding call against Utah, which would have ended the game. So BYU right now isn't a very hot team, whereas Arizona State, I think, is a much hotter team. And I understand the whole bounce back thing, but you know what? I don't think there's a difference between bouncing back and a team just like a bounce back game, a team being due for a bounce back game, and a team just not being that good. Like, I think a team like Georgia was due for a bounce back game against Tennessee. Whereas BYU, I just don't think is that good. That's the thing. I don't think they're that good. And so I like Arizona State. I think they're a hotter team right now. I like Arizona State to win and cover.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think Arizona State with the home field advantage is a solid pick. And I still think that BYU is riding high off of what some may argue was a lucky win against Utah a couple weeks ago. And obviously they did just lose to Kansas, so that was disappointing. And I really do like the way Arizona State has been playing. It nearly shut out Kansas State last week, and they've been on a very quiet roll, one of the most undercovered college football teams, if you will, in terms of national respects. Well, give me the Devils to get it done, and it'll probably end up being a close game. I'm gonna say 28-24. They barely cover inside the number.
All right.
Yeah, this is a very tough game to pick. Obviously, like you said, Nick, bounce back games are for teams that are actually good. And if BYU was a good team, then they would have bounced back after nearly losing to Utah, and then they ended up losing the week after. So they've been winning these bounce back games, and it just isn't happening. And I'm surprised because this BYU team actually looked really legitimate to start the season. And it seems like as each week goes on, these college teams are starting to figure out BYU, and they're just on the decline. And Arizona State's on the opposite end. They're on the incline. I mean, you got Cam Scatterbo, who's been great, catching and running for this team. Sam Levitt, the young quarterback, has been making tremendous plays, on the ground, running the ball and throwing the ball. Tyson, the wide receiver for Arizona State, has been solid as well. But I'm going to surprise you guys. I'm going to go with BYU still. I know Arizona State is the home team, but I feel like BYU, when they lose, it's because their quarterback, Jake Ratzliff, is usually under fire with a pass rush. And usually if you get them under the rest, they start to struggle a little bit. I feel like this game is going to be a good game for Jake Ratzlaff. They're going to keep them clean. And I think BYU is going to go out there, and even though they're the higher ranked team, they're going to get the upset.
All right. Ole Miss minus 10.5 at Florida. I hate how much I love Florida this game. They're the home team. They are often good. They often play well against superior competition. DJ Lagway is starting. I mean, they really laid an egg against Texas, and that's because Aiden Warner played instead of DJ Lagway or Graham Mertz. I mean, their quarterback situation is very odd. But even with Graham Mertz starting, they actually had some fairly good games. Like, they almost beat Tennessee. So I think that Florida will keep it within 10. Given that, like, that extra half a point makes me confident that Florida will probably cover. I mean, they lost by 2 touchdowns to Georgia, and that's also because there was a late pick 6 in the game. So I think that Florida will keep it a little bit close. And that's just always what they've been doing against really good teams.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess to piggyback off it, I think this is going to be an interesting SEC game. Obviously, Florida doesn't have a ton to play for. They're obviously not in SEC title contention. I think it'll be close, but they aren't good enough to cover the spread. I don't think this is just one of those games where you don't know what Florida team you're going to get, and that's why I think they'll ultimately struggle. You have to remember, Florida is one of the toughest schedules in college football. And this was the part of the season that a lot of people weren't looking forward to, especially near the end of the year when people really didn't know what Billy Napier's status was going to be as its head coach. So I think that Florida's struggles continue, unfortunately for them. So.
Yeah, this Florida team, my man, look out for the Florida Gators next year. That's what I'm going to say. They got a lot of young players, and that's probably what's going to end up saving Billy Napier's job. I mean, they got a lot of young players who are starting to buy in, and I think they're going to have something to build on for next year. Their freshman running back, Bog, I mean, he's been unbelievable the last few weeks. This defense has been improving. You can see the talent that DJ Lagway has. I mean, he's one of the best deep ball throwers in all of college football, so you got to be careful not to give up the deep passes. Other than that, though, he does struggle with the short and intermediate routes, and against this Ole Miss pass rush, that is a bad recipe. I think going in the swamp on the road, I think that's probably what makes this game a little closer than what people expect. I'm going to go Ole Miss, no cover, though. I think, everything went their way against Georgia. I think they're due for one of these really close SEC games. They'll still come out with the win due to their pass rush. I think they'll force DJ Lagway into a couple turnovers. I think Jackson Dart will have an overall good game. He's been keeping the ball clean as well. So I'm going to go Ole Miss, no cover.
All right. Illinois at Rutgers. Illinois just slipped in there. Illinois, or as I like to call them, the team ranked below UNLV, playing at Rutgers. I like Illinois -1. I think they're a much better team than Rutgers. I mean, I think we had some false hope with Rutgers earlier in the season, but I think we're kind of seeing them for what they are now.
Yeah, I mean, in doing research on this game, Rutgers' offensive line is just too banged up.
Yeah.
Don't really know what's going on with their running back situation either. I just think Illinois played really well. They played inspired football last week against Michigan State. I was there. It did what it needed to do. Its rushing attack was really good. And even though Luke Altmaier didn't have the greatest statistical game, he still quietly had a pretty good game. And this is one of those games where Illinois needs to win to remain in contention to potentially go to the Citrus Bowl if it can finish with 9 wins. So this is a game where Illinois can't slip up. I think what Vegas is trying to tell you is that Rutgers is a better Big Ten team than what people give it credit for. The big thing is, though, is you're playing against an Illinois team that knows how to really control the time of possession, and I think that's what's going to be the difference in the game. I think Illinois wins by 37-24. It's going to be a high scoring game, but I think that Illinois pulls away late. It's going to be one of those games where it's going to be oddly similar to the shootout against Purdue, but it's going to be a little bit more or less compactful, if that makes sense. But I like Illinois though.
Yeah, this Rutgers team started off hot, and then they had a lot of injuries on defense, and they kind of bounced back a little bit. Their receiving core has been pretty well. Damari Miller has been solid. Ian Strong has been good as well. They have a star running back, but he has been dealing with injuries on and off this year. So that hurts this team, and Illinois has been a solid team. I know they did slip up against Minnesota, but overall, I think this is a solid Illinois team that could play really good defense. Luke Altmaier could have his moments. I know it's on the road, so it can go either way. That's why it's a pick 'em, but I'm going to go with Illinois right now. I just think right now they're a better football team.
All right. So let's go through some of these games quickly. Vanderbilt at LSU, LSU -7.5. I like LSU to win, but not cover. That extra half a point scares me a little bit. I think LSU is a better team. Vanderbilt tends to be very, very good. Like they tend to play up to their competition a lot. And LSU, I think they're just so depleted right now. I don't think LSU is due for a bounce back game. I think the morale at LSU is just so bad right now.
Yeah, the team is flat at the moment.
They are so defeated.
Yeah, ever since that loss to Alabama a couple weeks ago, they haven't been the same team.
Yeah, and they haven't bounced back. I have no reason to believe they will. But I still think they'll win outright.
I would concur. What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, I'm gonna go LSU. No cover, like you said, they're out of the playoffs, so mentally they're not going to be in it. And this Vanderbilt team, they know they're not going to playoffs, but they're going to come in and want to play hard every single game. I mean, Diego Pavia is putting this team on his back, and this Vanderbilt's having the best season their school's probably ever had. So they're just going to keep trying to fly high, and it's going to be a close game. But I'll go LSU to win no cover.
All right. I do want to get to this USC -4.5 at UCLA.
Huge game. UCLA has really been on the comeback over the last few weeks, and
I would say it's a huge game.
I would say it's a huge game from a bowl and bragging rights standpoint, though.
Yeah, well, I don't think either of these teams are making a bowl game.
Never know.
Actually, USC could still make a bowl game. UCLA, I mean, I guess they could. I'd say it's a rivalry game, so it's big between both those teams, and those fan bases.
Well, actually, you're not wrong. USC has more of a realistic chance to make a bowl game, whereas UCLA needs to win both of its final two games.
Yeah,
6-6.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually believe in USC this game. UCLA is not great, and USC we know is not a great team on the road. But I still, which I don't know how much of a road game it really is. It's like, it's not far away. And also, I think USC often struggled in like Big Ten environments, cold weather environments, as opposed to like Pac-12 environments, which is what this would be for USC. And ever since they made the change at quarterback, I think things have been looking a little bit better. So I actually like USC to be able to, because look, earlier in the season, we saw some sparks from USC. I think they can get it done against UCLA.
What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, I'm going to go USC as well. I know UCLA has been having a tremendous comeback. I mean, they had one win for the longest time, and now they're 2 wins away from being bowl eligible. So both these teams are both playing for their bowl eligibility lives right now. And the USC they looked good last week against Nebraska. That was a very close game, and it was an impressive win for USC. They really needed that mentally. First game for the new quarterback, and it seems like I think that's got this team and momentum going upwards. And UCLA did stumble last week, and I just think in general I just think USC is just a better football team. So I'm going to go USC to win and cover.
All right. So wait, did you go, Zain?
Yeah, I mean, just to keep it brief, I do think USC, with some of the changes it's made, I think will do enough to win. But I actually think that that Foster, the coach of UCLA, deserves a ton of credit if he could really complete this comeback. And I would not be surprised if this is just another part of the story. If you would have told me a couple weeks ago that they would beat Iowa at home, given how UCLA started its season, I don't know if I would have believed it. But I feel like they're picking up the pieces at the right time. They're playing better football. They're not really worried about what the national media says about them. And they realize that they control their own destiny to go to a bowl. So does USC, which is why I think it's a huge game, and both teams will play inspired football, knowing that arguably whoever loses, their bowl hopes are essentially dead, because there's no way in the world that if USC loses this game that they're beating Notre Dame. So this is almost a must-win game for the Trojans if I've ever seen one. So
yeah, okay. And last one quickly: Penn State -12.5 at Minnesota. I love Penn State to win and cover. This is the type of game Penn State usually dominates in.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like Minnesota had all of its momentum a couple weeks ago when it upset Illinois, and then of course it had a downer the next week. This is typically what Minnesota likes to do in these situations. And yeah, I think Penn State is a better team, even though there's like a 98% chance it won't make the Big Ten championship. There's still that outside chance where it might. So they know that they have everything they need to play for, and they know that in order for them to win, in order for them to secure a home playoff game, it more than likely needs to win out. And it starts this week. I think they cover relatively easily. I think they win by about 17. So.
Yeah, I'm going to go Penn State to win and cover. Minnesota has a good running back. They have great secondary, which I think, Penn State's going to probably rely more on their running backs. Real quickly, the matchup you want to look out for in this one is Iranti Ursi, the tackle from Minnesota. Potential first-round pick going up against Abdul Carter for Penn State, who may be the top edge rusher in the entire draft. that matchup's going to have a lot to factor into this game. But I just think Penn State's overall defense will wear on Minnesota's offense, and they're going to go out and win and cover.
All right. So finally, we reached the end of the show. It's another edition of Unnecessary Wagers. So that's when I make a wager that's unnecessary, hence the name of the segment. So here's what I have. Nebraska minus 2.5, Pitt plus 8 at Louisville, A&M minus 2.5 at Auburn, the over in the LSU Vanderbilt game, over 53.5, Arizona State money line, Penn State money line, Quinshon Judkins for 63 or more rushing yards against Indiana, and Travion Henderson for 54 or more rushing yards against Indiana. Alabama minus 13.5, and Jam Miller as an anytime touchdown scorer. So that's $5 to win over $1,100.
I actually think that there's a chance. What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, I like it. I think Alabama is going to win big against Oklahoma, and I love Ohio State's running backs this week as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good chance I'll wake up on Saturday afternoon and find out I already lost. But you never know. There's always a chance. You got to hold that hope. It'll hit at some point.
That's true.
Right. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Zain Bando. That's Anthony Balester. This is Forever Power 5. We'll be back next week. Thanks for listening and watching, everybody.